Matt Hobbs. He is the former head of front-end development for the UK's government digital service. He's done some phenomenal work. He led a team of 30 people there, where he did some great work around performance and equity. And so I'm really excited about this presentation to learn more about bridging that digital divide. And everyone welcome Matt Hobbs.
Can you hear me? Hear me at the back? Perfect. Morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here as the first speaker on the second day of this amazing web performance conference. I'd like to thank the PerfNow team for inviting me to speak. I feel extremely privileged to be on this stage with such incredible speakers from the web performance community. My name is Matt Hobbs, and until recently, I was the head of front end at the UK's government digital service. Today, I'm delighted to speak to you about the topic of bridging the digital divide using web performance, with a specific focus on the United Kingdom. In an increasingly connected world, it is crucial to ensure that everyone has equal access to digital resources and opportunities. In this presentation, we will explore how optimizing web performance can play a significant role in bridging the digital divide. Note the background image of this slide. I took a leaf out of Mark's book yesterday and generated it using Midjourney last night. So anyway, let's get started. First, let's understand what is the digital divide. The UK, like many other developed countries, is experiencing an aging population. This is increasing due to longer life expectancy and lower mortality rates in older generations. A person born in the past 20 years will have been exposed to the internet, mobile phones, and tablets with connectivity with the whole world from a very early age. Their brain knows nothing more and nothing different than looking up any question they have on a digital device. Having two young sons, I've been witness to this over the past few years, as they are both very fluent with technology. The digital divide is the gap between those who've been privileged enough to be exposed to technology and those who haven't. Although I alluded to it in my previous slide, it's an oversimplification to say it's only a young versus old demographic issue, although it's an easy assumption to make. A major misconception that people believe when talking about the digital divide is that there's only one, when in fact a simple division between two clear social categories doesn't exist. We live in complex, multifaceted societies. A more accurate way to examine the digital divide is across entire populations, including people's social, economic, and cultural differences. There are many reasons why an individual won't have been exposed to the technology. For example, they come from a family with less disposable income to spend on luxuries like mobile phones, tablets, and computers. They live in a part of the country with poor connectivity or an underfunded education system. They simply haven't had the opportunity to use technology. Maybe they've had no one to show them how to use it. Or a common occurrence is getting someone else to do it all for them, e.g. a family member or friend. Maybe they don't understand the benefit that technology can bring, or a combination of above. There are many people in society that are scared of change, and technology is a huge change. You'll often hear comments like, "I've always done it this way, why change now?" Or "Technology is going to take my job." So why is it important to reduce the digital divide? Reducing the digital divide is essential to create a more fair and inclusive society where everyone has equal access to information and opportunities and tools to thrive in the digital era. A more fair and inclusive society will enable individuals and communities to take part in social, economic, and civic life and foster development and progress for all. In turn, this improves social inclusion and access to information and knowledge, leading to better economic opportunities, education, and skills development. Bridging the global knowledge gap will create a more inclusive and interconnected global community for everyone. So we know the digital divide is detrimental to society and is something that we should be aiming to reduce. But how can web performance help do this? Web performance is a crucial factor in bridging the digital divide, especially for users accessing the internet across a large range and speeds of devices. For example, across a whole country's population. So let's look at a few web performance topics individually. Number one, optimized and efficient web design. If websites and applications are well optimized to load quickly and function smoothly, they can be more accessible to people with slower internet connections and less advanced hardware. This includes practices like efficient use of code, optimizing images and video, and prioritizing the loading of critical content. Note my use of accessibility in this context is in the literal sense of the word, allowing a user to actually access the information they need. Here I'll share a personal experience that happened to me in July related to digital exclusion in rural areas of the UK. My family and I were recently at a friend's wedding at the Lake District, in the north of the UK. This picture is from Derwentwater Lake, around 30 miles from the border of Scotland. We stayed in an independent hostel next to Derwentwater Lake. It was only when we got there we realised how remote we actually were in terms of connectivity. There was no mobile service across the whole site, indoors or outside. Wi-Fi was only available in 2 small rooms downstairs, and none of the 30-plus bedrooms had Wi-Fi at all. The bandwidth available was extremely limited, 3.4 megabits download, 8.2 megabits upload. They even say on their website, free Wi-Fi, although speed and bandwidth is limited by our rural location. There were 150 plus guests at the wedding, and approximately 40 kids attended too, including 2 of my own. As you can imagine, there were quite a few disappointed children when their tablets couldn't stream from their favourite video streaming service. As you can see from the map of connectivity in the UK, updated in July, what we experienced while in the Lake District isn't an isolated case. It happens across the country. For those wondering, the orange dots signify less than 10 megabits available, red dots less than 2 megabits available. Lack of any colour means very little to zero connectivity available. Amazing, the specific area we stayed in, seen it by the purple arrow, I'm amazed that we had any connectivity at all. In fact, if we examine the 2023 report from the UK's communication regulator Ofcom, we can see that around 8% of the UK has no coverage by any of the mobile operators, the largest region being Scotland, at 17% of the country being a not spot for mobile data. As can be seen by looking at the map again, yes, these are rural areas, but they aren't devoid of people. They are full of everyday people trying to apply for passports, register a death, or file their tax returns. 17% of Scotland is a huge area with hundreds of thousands of people living in it. For those people, any mobile or broadband connection is likely to be precious. They most likely don't care about huge amounts of interactivity on a website. They want the site to load quickly and allow them to get from A to B with as little hassle as possible. The UK government is aware of this issue, as a report from the UK Parliament was published in June. The report is called "The Government Has No Credible Strategy to Tackle Digital Exclusion." The key findings of the report say the government's ambition to make the UK a technology superpower and boost economic growth is being undermined by high levels of digital exclusion. The committee says the scale of the problem is a direct consequence of political lethargy. Some of the figures that come from the report make for a pretty disheartening read. These include 7 million households in the UK have no broadband or mobile internet access, and 4 million people are still unable to complete a single digital task to get online. Unfortunately, the problem has only got worse in the past few years due to the cost of living crisis, as people are cancelling their monthly internet packages to save money. This is costing the UK economy approximately £63 billion every year because the country has a digital skills shortage. Among some of the recommendations the report calls for is urgent access to help with the cost of living crisis and a big investment in basic digital skills, as the most basic digital skills are now as important as maths and literacy. An interesting note from the report, it specifically says the focus should be on basic skills, not coding. The chair of the committee, Baroness Stowell of Beeston, hits the nail on the head with her summary comments, where she says, digital exclusion is a moving target. As technology develops, people currently confident using IT at work and home will need to keep refreshing their skills to avoid being left behind. We need to ensure that people We need to ensure that people of all age groups develop the skills they need to operate and the opportunities they need to develop their skills as technologies change. As we all know, technology does move fast and it's always changing. And as coming back to the issue, the point I mentioned earlier, this isn't a young versus old demographic issue. All groups must be involved in this digital upskilling. So whose responsibility is it for the digital upskilling to help bridge this digital divide? There are 6 key sectors that are responsible for reducing the digital divide. They could fall on, first, it falls on governments to enact sensible policies to ensure equal access for all. Private sector companies have a role to play as well. They can make their products more accessible and more affordable. Non-profit organisations are already working in this space to provide people with equipment and training and internet access. Schools and universities should incorporate digital literacy into their curriculums. This is particularly important for rural and low-income areas, as students may not have access to the resources at home. Individuals can help bridge the digital divide by donating old equipment and volunteering to teach digital literacy skills. Global organisations like the United Nations and World Bank already provide funding and support for projects, especially in developing countries. All these entities have a role to play, and it's only through a combined effort that the digital divide can be addressed. As the creepy Wonka meme says, what's in it for me? Why would I, as an individual or organisation, do this? If we go back to our depressing map of the connectivity in the UK, we see there are 7 million households that have no broadband or mobile internet access. And this is costing, as I mentioned, this is costing approximately £63 billion every year. If you're a business, that's a lot of potential customers. If you're a charity, that's a lot of potential donations. If you're the government, that's a lot of people you're excluding from your services. And remember, they're all paying some form of tax. They have as much right to access your services as everyone else does. So let's see. Is this a UK-only issue? Unfortunately, no. This is a global issue with a staggering 2.7 billion people, or 1/3 of the global population, still remain unconnected to the internet. This is according to the International Telecommunications Union in 2022. The ITU statistics say that the cost of mobile and broadband services has dropped recently, but it still remains too high for the average customer in a low-income economy. A basic data plan in a low-income economy costs approximately 9% of the average income. People living in this situation are literally choosing between food and housing or connectivity. Under these circumstances, connectivity is always going to be the lowest priority. So coming back to what's in it for me. Well, there are 7 million households in the UK alone that could be your next customers, worth billions to the economy. And magnitudes greater is the 2.7 billion people, roughly 1/3 of the global population, that are yet to connect to the internet. So target these low-income economies. Web performance is vital to being successful in these low-income economies. As the memorable phrase from JFK goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you make your sites fast for a low-income economy, it will be fast for everywhere, everybody, and everyone. Number 2, mobile-first design. Given that a large proportion of users in countries on the other side of the digital divide access the internet through a mobile device, as seen in this graph, where 50 to 75% of the population use smartphones. Keithan's fantastic talk yesterday touched on this topic. Designing with a mobile-first approach ensures that they have the best available experience given any device limitations they may have. Responsive web design allows a website to adapt to the screen size and capabilities of the device accessing it, which is key for users with low-end devices and slow network connections. Here I focus on UK data from gov.uk. For those who are not from the UK, here's an explanation of what it is. Gov.uk is the website for the UK government. It is the best place to find policy announcements, information about government, and guidance for citizens. Since 2012, it has replaced 1,884 government websites with just one to become the home of all central government's online content and services. You can see what gov.uk looks like here on the slide. This is on an iPad, iPhone, and a Dell laptop. You will see this on the slide. You see the site on the slide is built using mobile-first design principles. The design is clean and simple and lends itself to being a mobile website. It was a brave decision by the GDS design team to use a mobile-first approach back in 2012 when it was first launched. Considering the now famous A List Apart article, Responsive Web Design by Ethan Marcotte had only just been released in mid-2010, and it wasn't until 2013 that responsive web design took the internet by storm. In fact, Mashable actually called 2013 the year of responsive web design. To back up this claim, they released a responsive version of their website for the post-PC era, as they called it. Back to the topic of gov.uk, this is what the site looked like before. It wasn't exactly mobile friendly, and many would say it wasn't very user friendly either. I remember this was, and still is, a fully taxpayer funded service. The new design was quite controversial at the time. There were quite a few angry members of the public leaving comments on the GDS blog post announcing the launch. Here, a random member of the public named Howard Andrews comments, "Where is the government website for grown-ups? This is the whole of gov.uk is obviously designed for primary school children and those with special educational needs." This seems pretty harsh, Howard. I'd be interested to know if he feels the same after 11 years. In hindsight, there wasn't actually a market in 2012 for a mobile-first government website, so you can imagine why it was such a controversial decision. In 2012, 80% of the UK population were accessing the gov.uk via a desktop computer, and less than 20% of users were visiting via a mobile phone or tablet. But if we fast forward 8 years, 2 months, 9 days to the 4th of January 2021, which happens to be gov.uk's busiest day ever, things look very different. This is 8 months into the COVID-19 lockdown in the UK, when the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, tells everyone to stay at home for the UK's third national lockdown. On this evening, gov.uk has its highest traffic in its 9-year history. At the peak, the Google Analytics real-time data broke due to the 88,000 requests per second that were hitting the site. The relevant part to this section comes in this graphic. When the real-time tracking data broke, 85% of gov.uk users were on a mobile device, with only 11% of users on a desktop. What a difference 9 years can make in technology. Two other important dates regarding mobile-first design on gov.uk. October 2019 was when we saw mobile usage finally exceed desktop usage month on month, as seen via the red arrow. And in March 2020, we saw a huge shift in user numbers using mobiles, seen via the blue arrow. This shift happens to coincide with Boris Johnson urging everyone in the UK to work from home and avoid pubs and restaurants. COVID-19 looks to have been a huge catalyst for greater mobile usage, at least on gov.uk anyway. Remember at the time, this was life-saving information being given to the masses via mobile-first design principles. If that's not a reason to bridge the digital divide for everyone in society, regardless of their location or circumstances, I don't know what is. What we are seeing here is an example of how mobile-first and optimized web design save lives. To reiterate the importance of mobile-first responsive design across a large population, here are some more gov.uk data from the start of this year. On the left is a heat map of all screen resolutions that visited gov.uk in a single month. There are so many resolutions. Towards the bottom right corner of the image, the text disappears into a blur of thousands of individual images. On the right is the actual number of combinations seen. The important number here is 51,989 screen resolutions visiting gov.uk in a single month. Thank goodness for mobile-first responsive design. There is way too many resolutions and devices to test on, so resilience and flexibility has to be built into the design to cater for everyone, every user visiting, no matter what device and screen size they're using. Speaking of user devices, it isn't always desktop, tablet, and mobile phones being used either. Usually, the most popular tweet in the gov.uk stats thread I posted on Twitter every month was this one. Month on month, we saw users using games consoles to visit gov.uk, and delving into the data, they aren't only visiting the homepage. There are vulnerable people trying to visit the site to find a job, find information on the cost of living, and sign into their universal credit account. There's a user story that was always spoken about at GDS. It was written up by Terence Eden, who was witness to it. I'll try to paraphrase the story for you here. Terence is doing policy research in a housing benefits office in London. A young woman sits in the middle of the office and is surrounded by bags. These are all her worldly possessions. She's holding a PlayStation Portable or a PSP. He assumes she's playing a game to pass the time. It turns out she's using the free Wi-Fi and the PSP's crappy browser to read the housing benefits pages of gov.uk. She's been kicked out of her house and her parents' house, and she now has nowhere to live. The PSP is a hand-me-down from an older brother. When asked about why she's using a PSP to browse the internet, her response is, "It's shit, but it worked." My paraphrased version doesn't do the story justice, so I'd recommend reading Terence's blog post in full. It's called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Simple HTML, and this reiterates everything that Ryan was saying yesterday in his excellent talk. So if there's one thing you take away from this talk today, it's when building a website in the future, remember to consider users whose response to the device they're using is "it's shit, but it worked." As I'd imagine, there are millions of people across the world who are in a very similar position to the young woman mentioned in the story. They can't afford the latest device and data required to use them, so they're using a second or third-hand device with a borrowed internet connection to complete the tasks they need to. Number 3, accessibility considerations and digital exclusion. I can't stress this point enough. If we want to bridge the digital divide and reduce digital exclusion, accessibility is a huge part of the problem that needs consideration. By accessibility, I mean the literal meaning, a user being able to access the information they need, and also the use of assistive technologies like screen readers and braille readers. Whereas there is no legal requirement for a fast and performant website, the same can't be said for accessibility. In certain sectors of the UK and EU, compliance with WCAG is a legal requirement, and soon a new regulation will become law called the European Accessibility Act. More on that in a few slides' time. The US has similar requirements with Section 508 and ARDA. In my opinion, good web performance also means ensuring that websites are accessible to users with disabilities. And this means creating websites that are compatible with assistive technologies and designing interfaces that are easy to use. Now, since Chrome Lighthouse comes with a whole set of accessibility audits, I'd like to think that many in the web performance community agree with this stance. On the slide, you will see a small number of accessibility audits Lighthouse looks for. According to my last review of the documentation, it has 57 it runs in total for accessibility. When many people mention accessibility, a large proportion likely think this. This is the symbol used in the UK to signify someone in a wheelchair or a person with a physical ailment. But as I mentioned earlier, how the digital divide isn't only a young versus old demographic issue, it's exactly the same for accessibility. As the saying goes, we're all just temporarily abled. So design and build for your future self. But there's more to accessibility than physical ailments. Here we have 6 icons from Microsoft that they use when talking about inclusive design. Listed, we have permanent disabilities, like having one arm, deafness, blindness, and being a new parent. Also, temporary disabilities, like having an injury or having an eye or ear infection. Then there are the situational disabilities, like being in a noisy or distracting environment or a place with poor lighting. But there's actually more to consider. Not included in the previous slides are the hidden disabilities. These include things like autism, mental health issues, sensory processing disorder, multiple sclerosis, dyslexia, dyspraxia, epilepsy, and the one I know well, traumatic brain injury, e.g. from brain surgery. I don't mind talking about this quite traumatic part of my life, but for those who don't know, in April 2021, I was diagnosed with a huge brain tumour. After 7 hours of brain surgery, in which 15% of my brain matter was removed, I not only woke up with the worst headache of my entire life, but also a really annoying temporary weakness in my left arm and hand, meaning I couldn't use my phone and laptop fully for many weeks post-surgery. If you're interested in what my brain looks like, the before and after MRI scans are on the slide now. In fact, I'm still considered disabled as I'm prone to seizures and have to take daily medication to control them. Apologies for the huge tangent there. I just wanted to emphasize the point that disabilities come in all shapes and sizes, hidden and not so hidden. Building for accessibility and inclusivity is a challenge, but it's vital if we want to bridge the digital divide. As I mentioned earlier, I'd like to think that as you're attending this wonderful web performance conference, you're already thinking about building inclusive websites that minimize their device footprint and utilize efficient use of your users' limited data. An excellent resource for the current state of accessibility on the web is the Web Almanac, which I'm sure many of you have read or even contributed to. I know Rick Viscomi is here today, who is project lead on the Almanac, so a massive thank you to him for all the work he's done over the years. Comparing the 2021 versus 2022 Almanac reveals some positives, like there's been an almost 9% increase in the use of Focus Visible, but it also goes on to say there's still plenty to do with straightforward fixes like using image alt tags correctly, with approximately 2.2% of websites have alt text that can say as a file extension, and fixing anchor tags with a roll of button, which according to the Almanac, 20% of websites do. And finally, adjusting pages to have improved color contrast. Just fixing these three issues could improve accessibility on a large number of websites. Like Annie Cook once said, there's no MVP without accessibility. The web community needs to realize that a website only has a great user experience when that user experience works for everyone, irrespective of the device and assistive technology used. It's this user experience built for everyone that is going to be key to bridging the digital divide for all demographics. And web performance is an incredibly important part of delivering a good user experience. As I briefly mentioned earlier, if you're a company that wishes to do business in the UU, you should add the 28th of June 2025 to your diary, as this is when the European Accessibility Act becomes law for all member states. I'd recommend making your business ready for this important upcoming date to avoid the ban from trading in the EU for non-compliance. Number 4, content delivery networks. They're essential for fast and resilient websites, especially ones used by millions of people across the globe. The speed of light is quick, but when you're still looking at a ping time of 255 plus milliseconds between London and Sydney, as seen on the graph here. 255 milliseconds doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when a HTTP negotiations take multiple round trips, even before the first byte of website data is sent, this all adds up. That's why you want servers in many geographic locations across the world to mirror your content and deliver it to your users from the server closest to them. As I'm sure you all know, the specific metric I'm talking about is time to first byte, or TTFB. And as Harry Roberts said in 2019, while a good TTFB doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a fast website, a bad TTFB almost certainly guarantees a slow one. So make sure you minimize your time to first byte to ensure your users aren't left with a page that is unresponsive and frustrating to use. As I mentioned, another very important reason for using a CDN is resilience. What happens to your website when your origin falls over? More importantly, what happens to your users? When a user enters their URL into your address bar, they expect you to still be there, not an empty page staring back at them. Or even worse, a server error message that they likely don't understand. For users who aren't technically savvy, I'd imagine this screenshot displayed on the slide would be highly stressful. Do users even know or care what a server is? Probably not. They only want to visit your site, complete a task, and get on with their lives. Referring back to gov.uk's busiest day I mentioned earlier in the talk, this is what the site's traffic looked like in Google Analytics. 760,000 plus concurrent users hitting the website looking for life-saving COVID information. Thankfully, due to gov.uk's use of a CDN, this is what the users saw. Yes, it's pretty unremarkable. The users saw the standard gov.uk homepage with all the important information and news about the national lockdown, COVID-19 travel advice, and Brexit still available to read. What fun 2021 was on gov.uk. I think this is a great quote that sums up CDNs quite well. It's like being a duck, calm and unruffled on the surface, but paddling like hell underneath. And this is pretty much what was happening. There were some pretty impressive Fastly CDN stats from that day. Between 3.2 and 3.2 million concurrent users, approximately 88,000 requests per second, a 99% cache hit rate at the CDN, and for the 17 million page views between 8 and 9 p.m., only 500 errors were served. I personally think that's pretty impressive for a public service website, and without a CDN, gov.uk would have buckled under those huge user numbers. In turn, it would have left their users without vital, life-saving information they needed. Here are some of the same stats for the same CDN stats in graph form. The top graph is the cache hit rate. The bottom graph is the number of concurrent requests hitting the CDN. While CDNs bring increased web performance, if we take the literal meaning of the word, they also increase accessibility. They do this by giving a much greater number of users globally access to the information they serve. Another important service CDNs are able to provide is optimized versions of content. For example, content that is specifically tailored for low-end devices, like the one seen here, a low-spec Android device available on pay-as-you-go for £52.99 in my local Tesco supermarket. CDNs also help users on limited and expensive data plans. Here we see that the Falkland Islands is the second most expensive country in the world for mobile data, with 30 gigabytes costing upwards of £30. No, 1 gigabyte costing upwards of £30. In summary, CDN providers play a huge part in bridging the digital divide, from improved access to the internet and reducing costs for users. They also enhance performance, provide resilience and scalability for critical online services. Number 5, data compression. Since we've been talking about CDNs, it's a great time to mention data compression too. Data compression helps reduce the size of data over the network, improving page load times and reducing data usage. This is critical for users on limited data plans. A reduction in the amount of data transferred will also lead to energy savings. This is not only good for the environment, but also translates into cost savings for users. As we saw on the previous slide, people in St Helena and the Falkland Islands need as much help as they can when it costs upwards of £30 per gigabyte of data. This is also where data compression can help rural users. Thankfully, over the past few years, the number of websites enabling some form of compression on their assets has been increasing. The graphs on the slide show a drop in uncompressed requests between 2019 and 2021. For desktop users, this is 5.3%. For mobile users, this is a little less at only 4.5%. It's actually getting easier for web developers to enable data compression on their websites, with many CDNs offering asset compression at the touch of a button. Compression at the edge is perfect for lazy developers, where the uncompressed file is fetched from the origin and compressed on the fly by the CDN. It's possible to do this automatically when assets are updated too. It really can be a set it and forget it solution. The use of Brotli compression will reduce data over the network even further, with many of the major CDNs now supporting it by default. According to Cloudflare, by compressing Brotli at level 11, developers are able to reduce their file sizes by 19% compared to the best gzip compression level. They later go on to say how utilizing Brotli at its highest compression levels can lead to improved website performance and website page load times. And I'm sure the folks on this graph would love a 19% reduction in their data usage. At these prices, 19% would save them a small fortune. And it isn't all about remote islands in the South Pacific that have this issue. These BBC articles from 2020 describe how residents of rural villages in Wales feel totally isolated and forgotten. They talk about having to walk up hills just to get a mobile signal. And one article even mentions how the village hasn't got a reliable radio or TV signals either. Going back to the map I showed earlier in the UK, this is an issue across the whole of the United Kingdom. It's currently known as a postcode lottery in the UK, whether you get a fast connection or not. In summary, data compression has a vital part to play in bridging the digital divide. It reduces data over the network and improves page load times. More importantly, less data usage allows users on limited data plans in rural areas to gain access to the information they need, no matter where they are or the device they are using. I believe Pat Meenan's talk is talking about compression dictionaries later today, and I'm sure he will cover some upcoming improvements in data compression too. So make sure you check that out. Number 6, offline capabilities and progressive web apps. As the last topic I will briefly touch on is the web platform's offline capabilities and discuss if they can help when coming to the digital divide for users. The web platform has a powerful set of APIs that are designed to help users who struggle with connectivity issues. The key API I'm talking about is the Service Worker API. Is the Service Worker API ready to be used? Well, according to Jake Archibald, one of the W3C API authors, yes, it is. And there's a whole website here saying it is. And the web platform information website Can I Use is in agreement, with 94.4% of users globally currently using a browser that supports the API. The natural progression from the Service Worker API is progressive web apps. These apps leverage the Service Worker API to allow web applications to access native device features. One of the standout PWAs that is often cited is the Starbucks store locator and easy ordering app. The success of this app comes with some pretty impressive web performance stats. The native Starbucks app was a hefty 148 megabytes to download, a huge download for low data users. The PWA version came in at 233 kilobytes, a whopping 99.84% smaller. This led to improved order diversity by 23%. The lightweight app opened up Starbucks to a larger user base simply because there wasn't the 148 megabyte barrier to entry for their digital storefront. Having said all this, I personally believe that using PWAs for web performance and reducing the digital divide could likely be a double-edged sword. Don't get any ideas, Robin. Yes, this is a fine-grained. Yes, you get very fine-grained control over caching and the use and a much smaller footprint than a native app. But on the slide, we see how. But on the slide, how do you explain this concept to someone who is less technically savvy or scared of technology? For example, when a user visits a website, but it then becomes a native app on their phone's home screen. Is the user left asking, why is this website asking me to add something to my own home screen? What is a home screen? Why is it now an app? Where did the App Store go? This could likely be very confusing for a confusing user experience. I'd struggle to explain this concept to my parents and even my younger sister, who are all daily phone users, but aren't heavily into technology like I am. I personally feel that PWAs may be a bridge too far for many non-technical users, but I'd love to hear if anyone has had success using PWAs and users with limited digital skills. Maybe it's a topic to discuss over lunch later. So that's pretty much the end of my talk. I only have a few more slides before I finish. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, the whole web performance community, as the past few years have been pretty rough for my family and I. As I mentioned earlier, back in April 2021, I was diagnosed with a grade 3 brain tumour, completely unforeseen after having no symptoms at all. Upon seeing the size and location of the cancer, I was pretty certain that I'd just been handed a death sentence, and that I'd be lucky to get to my 40th birthday in the December of that year. While waiting 6 months for my brain surgery, the web performance community were there to help keep me occupied and help me get over the huge life-changing news. A few kind folks even banded together to buy me this 7,500-piece Lego Millennium Falcon, to help keep me occupied during my recovery. My sons and I were completely blown away when we opened the box. But after 7 hours of awake open-head brain surgery, 33 rounds of radiotherapy, and 4 cycles of chemotherapy, thankful to the wonderful National Health Service and the miracle of modern medicine, I'm still here. So a big thank you to Tammy Eberts, Andrew Betts, Barry Pollard, Patrick Meenan, Cliff Crocker, and Andy Davis, who I want to buy a nice cold Dutch beer over the next day or so. You're going to make me cry. And not only, I'm not the only person to comment on this fact. I shared this tweet with from Alex Russell, where he comments, I can't say often enough how kind, supportive, and collegial the web performance community is. Truly the best of us, staring endlessly at the worst of the web community's excesses and staying positive. A comment I completely agree with. And that's the end of my talk. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it interesting. And I want to take a second to mention that I'm currently looking for my next job role. So if you know anyone who is hiring, please do get in contact with me. I have all my slides, all my sources in the final slide. Any questions? Thanks again.
Great job, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, God, this is really awkward. I don't even think I can get up there.
Should we lead?
I can lean. All right. Thanks, Matt. That was a great talk, wasn't it, everyone? This is my standing desk now. All right. So there was one general question asked about where the slides are going to be. They are all going to be on the website. So if you want to access the slides, they will be collected there.
Yeah.
But you talked about how to get decision makers to invest in equity and access in terms of like revenue or lost donations and things. But how do you motivate developers to care who may not be familiar with the circumstances that their users are in? What strategies do you recommend?
I would say for me, it's always been iterate small, like start small and build up as you sort of do it yourself. Mm-hmm. So at GDS, I was pretty much the only person interested in and iterating web performance, mm-hmm. and it was quite hard. You're pushing things uphill to get it started. Mm-hmm. But once you start the actual process of pushing it uphill, you can actually bring people along with you, and sort of being able to use other developers and other people in the organization, mm-hmm. is a big help. Mm-hmm. But if you do it completely on your own, you'll completely burn out. So it definitely start small, and if you make if you make something important that you are you celebrate, completely celebrate the hell out of it, and sort of like publish on Twitter, publish a blog post, and sort of bring people along for the ride. That's what I think, anyway.
Yeah, those are great
sense.
tips. Thanks. And then we had a question from Marcel, who said, how do you fight the temptation of a growing number of frameworks and libraries that are used to simplify development, with an impact on performance for slower connections and devices when working on gov.uk?
I think it has to be, I think you have to start looking at users. You need to approach users and make sure that you're doing user testing. So go to, I mean, the example of the lady in the office where she's on a crappy PSP. Go to places like that and actually see how a user actually interacts with the website. And it's just having a bit of, for me, it's a bit of empathy, having empathy for for users, and making sure that they have the ability to sort of get to the information that they need, and and trying to use, as Ryan said yesterday, use the right tool for the job. If you're downloading like hundreds of megabytes of JavaScript, then users are going to have a bad time. So definitely try and sort of use empathy and sort of change whatever the tool is best to use.
For sure.
If that makes sense.
All right. I think we'll do one more question. What's one change you advocated for that you're most proud of, or that had the most impact, you think?
I think it was when I managed to enable HTTP2 on gov.uk, because it was quite a, when I first enabled it and I changed the how it worked, it all went horribly wrong. It actually got worse, and I was literally ripping my hair out. Not that I had much hair at that time, but no, it was not good at all. So I had to go back to the drawing board and sort of change. There were issues with we were using sub-resource integrity for JavaScript and for CSS, and it was breaking. It was slowing down HTTP2, but I managed to turn it off, and it thankfully it actually worked out. So that's probably one of my achievements there.
Awesome. So. Well, everyone, thank you again. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.